right, everyone. My name is Joseph. My family is Emerald Spirit Botanicals. We've been growing cannabis for a while now, since the 90s. We're going to go into a number of different things today, talking about minor cannabinoids, some of the breeding work that we've been doing to work with cannabis. And then towards the end, I've got some questions for you guys. I'd love to hear more from you instead of me just telling you everything that I have to say. I want to make this reciprocal as well. So most of the slides today are going to be picture-oriented. I don't want to go too deep into the science and leave people behind. I want to kind of leave a little bit of wonder and curiosity, and as they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So hopefully that helps to stimulate your imagination a little bit. All right, so the first thing that I want to get out of the way is, what does our cannabis farm look like? It is definitely not your average cannabis farm in California or anywhere in the United States. This is a diversified homestead. As you can see up here, we're growing vegetables, which you can see on the right. On the left is our cannabis. We have a number of beneficial herbs, flowers, supporting habitat for beneficial insects. This is a diverse ecosystem that's building a naturally resilient homeostasis space for our cannabis to be healthy and happy while we're bringing medicine to the people. Most of what we're growing is all from seed, and I'll go into why we work from seed instead of working from clone throughout this presentation. The food that we have in the farm is mostly for our family. That's how we nourish ourselves, to continue to take care of this plant, to continue to take care of the land, and to nourish our bodies. A brief history of who we are and where we come from. My family has been farming and gardening since 1936 in Mendocino County. We may even go back further than that. My first family members came to Willits in the 1800s, but it was not clear if they had a farm or a garden. In the 90s, my parents began growing cannabis for personal health and well-being. This was a plant that brought them peace of mind and helped them work with some of the health challenges that they were working through. And that really started a relationship with this plant, that this was always about medicine. This was about healing. This was about balance. And this was about bringing balance to our community. And as you'll find throughout this talk, cannabis has, for thousands of years, always been about that balance. And that's what we're continuing to try to promote here. In 2016, my mother, my brother, and I founded Emerald Spirit Botanicals. As we were coming out of Prop 215, coming into Prop 64, we made the jump to go into the legal market. We had always had a perspective of working with this plant for its medicinal potential, and we felt the best way to reach our patients was to enter the legal space and to help bring that medicine to the people in the way that they felt safe to receive it, and we could come out of the shadows and we could share the work that we had been doing since the 90s. The perspectives that we carry on the farm are pretty unique. Financial motivations are not at the forefront of what we do. This is not a cash crop for us. This is about healing humanity. This is about healing the soil. This is about bringing balance into our lives so that we can bring balance into the lives of our community, so that our community can bring balance into our culture and beyond. Right now, when we look at our culture, we see that there is so much out of balance. And when we look at the history of cannabis, we see that for the last thousands of years, cannabis has been an incredible plant medicine for restoring balance and homeostasis in the human being and also in cultures abroad. Some of the perspectives that we use include organics and permaculture, which some of you may be familiar with. Some other elements you may not be familiar with include biodynamic agriculture and plant-spirit communication. On our farm, we recognize that the plant is a living spiritual being. Behind the physical plant being itself is a life force that moves through the plant and breathes with us as we move through the garden with her. Honoring the spirit behind the cannabis allows us to commune with the cannabis plant in a very unique way that allows us to participate in the breeding work and help the plant bring forward some of the unique cannabis medicine that it has to offer for humanity at this time. One of our perspectives that we've come to in working with plant-spirit communication is that the cannabis plant is actually a higher evolved being than we are as humans. When we look at the history of cannabis and plants on this planet, plants have been here much longer than humans have. Plants have developed a system in which they can survive on the planet better than humans can. Without plants, humans perish. And so therefore, we live from the perspective that the plants are our guides. And if we can shut down our minds and open our hearts and listen to the spirit of cannabis, that she can be an incredible guide in showing us how to promote balance and how to bring healing to our culture at this time. This is a quote that comes from a man named Rudolf Steiner. He has been an incredibly influential human being in my life. He was raised in Germany during the late 1800s, early 1900s. And I invite you to speak the words as I read them, just so that they can help enter your being and come into your soul a little bit deeper than as if I read them to you. So I'm going to read it. Feel free to read it along. Spirit is never without matter. Matter is never without spirit. And we must say to ourselves, we will do everything material in the light of the Spirit. And we will seek the light of the Spirit in such a way that it enkindles warmth in us for our practical deeds. When we look deeper into what Steiner is talking about here, we can find a relationship between the spiritual realm and the material realm. Who here has heard of the physicalist and vitalist debate? Raise of hands. That's okay. Most people haven't. This is a debate that's been going on through humanity since the times of ancient Greece. It's a debate that at this current time is not paid much attention to. Right now, we live deeply in the physical realm. The material realm guides our day-to-day activities, and the spiritual realm is mostly forgotten or seen as an afterthought. It's poo-pooed, it's pushed away, and people who acknowledge it are often shown as castaways. The spirit is what brings life to the material realm. When we have a physical body, it is a corpse. What brings life to that corpse is the vitality, the life force that moves through it. And when we work with that vitality and work with that life force to bring new life forward, that is called breeding. And what we're doing on our farm in Mendocino County is we are breeding new cannabinoid ratios and new cannabis plants that the cannabis plant herself is guiding us to help bring forward. So this is a very different relationship than what most breeders have. Instead of me setting an idea of what I want from the plant and manipulating it to create what I want, we are stepping back and listening and asking the cannabis plant, what does she believe is needed for humanity at this time? And that goes back to this concept that cannabis is evolving ahead of us, and we need to be listening to her for guidance on how to bring this new medicine forward. So with that perspective, what have we come up with? Different ways of honoring the plant. And we do this through ceremony. We do this through working with the moon, working with the stars, working with the planets. These are not traditional methods of agriculture. This is an ancient method of agriculture known as biodynamics. When we look at the history of what agriculture was before the industrialization process, we see that the peasants and the people working with the land listened to these rhythms. They watched the moon, they watched the stars, they watched the planets, and those were the guides of when they worked with the plants and how they worked with the plants. And when we take those rhythms and we bring them into ceremony and we open our hearts and our minds to the spirit of cannabis that lives behind it, we are guided to create places like this where we can honor the plant spirit medicine and we can create a safe environment for these plants to be born, for these plants to grow and thrive, and for them to bring new medicine out to the people so that we have a better chance of finding balance in our culture at this time. When most people think of cannabis, they think of the female plant. And about 95% of people, I think that's all they'll ever engage with. There are a few select group of farmers that work from a breeding perspective and honor the male plant. And this is an important part of creating new seeds and bringing this new medicine down for the people. On our farm, the males are on what we call a vision quest. On a vision quest, we are working with the plants in a very special way in which they can live in the native soil with very little additional nutrients, with very little additional water. This brings them back to origin, to where the cannabis plants lived and the experience they had before agriculture came and brought cannabis into the current industrial models that we see today. So our male plants are able to experience the origin and the history of where they came from. They can be reminded of that in their growing experience each year on the farm. By doing that, that allows them to connect back to their ancestry. That allows them to become more sensitive to the unique environment of Earth. In industrial agriculture, we are feeding an excessive amount of nutrients, an excessive amount of water. Everything is in excess in today's age. And if we breed from that state of excess, then we are breeding plants that are relying on that excessive abundance. And so we want to continue to bring that archetype of balance into everything we do. And in the male plant, that is by sending them to the Vision Quest Garden where they can live in the native soil, where they can receive very little water, nutrients, build that resiliency, build that adaptability, and bring that into the future generations that we breed on the farm. When we look at the male plant, it's a completely different expression than the female plant. You can see there's a male plant that's over in the display area. It actually produces a true flower, whereas the female plant does not produce a true flower. It's a bud, hence the term bud. This counter to most people's beliefs, this actually does attract the honeybees. A lot of people have, sprayed female plants with honey and sugar and taken these incredible Instagram shots with bees all over them. Don't be mistaken. This is a wind-pollinated plant. However, As these plants produce true flowers, we do on occasion see the honeybees and the bumblebees coming to visit. But for the most part, this is a wind-pollinated plant. And when we look at the pollen, you can see here, this is a beautiful picture that actually captures the small specks of pollen coming off of the male plant. We live in a state of metaphors. And in our perspective of looking at these plants, this represents the air element, the etheric element. This is helping us come closer to spirit. And what we have found is that the male plants are bringing down new medicine for humanity at this time. So as the plant evolves, the male plant is able to begin landing this new medicinal potential into a material form. And it begins with this pollen. We then harvest the pollen and bring that into the garden, where we hand pollinate our females. This allows us to select which male and which female will be able to bring seed for the future. The way that we determine the pollination process is through a spiritual scientific breeding approach. Some of it is done by analyzing cannabinoid ratios in males and females, and we can identify when a certain cannabinoid is present, and we can breed and select for males and females expressing that specific cannabinoid. But we also work from a spiritual perspective, and that includes plant meditations with the female plants, asking her which pollen would she like to receive to produce the seeds for the future. And this is a completely different approach than what I've seen from the majority of breeders out there. Instead of us pushing pollen onto the female plant and telling her what she will produce, she gets to be a part of the process, and she gets to choose which males pollinate her to bring the seeds for the future. And I think that is a critical step in breeding new medicine for the people. Because instead of us telling the plant what we think she should produce, she can tell us what she wants to produce. And it creates two opportunities, one through science and one through spirit, to bring new medicine for the people. A talk about cannabis it's essential to have something about the endocannabinoid system. Do you all know what the endocannabinoid system is? Yes, nods of heads, great, somewhat. So the endocannabinoid system is a system that is in every single human being and many animals on the planet. From the time before you are born, you are naturally producing cannabinoids in your body until the day you die. And so inside of ourselves, we have the ability to produce the exact same compounds. Well, let me take that back. We have the ability to produce similar compounds to that of which the cannabis plant produces. The compounds produced in our body are endogenous cannabinoids, cannabinoids produced within the body. The cannabinoids produced by the cannabis plant are phytocannabinoids, cannabinoids produced within the plant. But what we are finding and what we have been experiencing for thousands of years is that these cannabinoids, both endogenous and phyto-derived, can work together inside of the human body to create balance. And the fact that we have been limited and in some cases jailed for the production and growth of this plant that itself is the crime. Not the cultivation of the plant, but the regulatory frameworks that gave people a reason to send people to jail for cultivating this plant. That is the crime, because what they don't want you to know is that we're producing these compounds in our body every single day. And that's how, when we experience pain and that pain slowly goes away, you can thank the endocannabinoid system for that. When you fall and hurt yourself and your skin begins to heal, you can thank the endocannabinoid system for that. When you go to the doctor and get a cancer diagnosis, and then later on find out that that cancer has been healed, you can thank the endocannabinoid system for that. And what this cannabis plant is able to do is to support that endocannabinoid system in times when our own internal system cannot produce enough to restore homeostasis. The cannabis plant is capable of remediating that and bringing healing and bringing balance back to the body. And that's why this plant is capable of healing so many ailments. It's quite fascinating to think that anything from pain to sleep to focus to cancer, seizures, so many different things with so many different symptoms, and it all comes back to this plant. And the reason it does is behind the endocannabinoid system. So going back to the breeding work, after the seeds have formed, we have this magical moment that has occurred in which our work with the male and our work with the female has brought down this new medicine, and it has literally formed a seed that is going to bring these unique cannabinoids forward. And that right there, I think, is one of the greatest miracles of life, of breeding, of creating seed, and of working with these plants in a special way to create new, unique cannabinoid profiles. So the way that we welcome these new seeds on our farm is through ceremony, honoring these plants, welcoming these new seeds, and giving them hope and inspiration and extra will from these ceremonies to bring new medicine forward for the people, to bring healing to the people, to bring healing to the land. At the center of our greenhouse lies this altar. It's working with the 4 directions. It's working with the 4 elements. If you look closely, you can see the air element is represented on the left. It's a little bit cut off, but up at the top are 2 small candles in the rocks. That's the fire element. Over on the right here is the water element, and down below is the earth element. These 4 elements are the creation of life. Without these elements, life on earth would not exist as we know. And that is the heart of the greenhouse, where our new seeds are born and where the new medicine is born to bring healing for the people. Through ceremony and prayer and careful work with the plants, the new medicine is born and experiences its childhood at the heart of the garden. From there, we uppot the plants and bring them outside where they're planted in the native soil, in the diverse landscape of our home, mixed with food, flowers, medicinal herbs, native plants, native animals. This is a holistic, wild environment where the medicine can experience both origin and modern-day culture. Now we're going to take a step into some of the genetics that we've created through the processes that I've just walked you through. This one here is Rose Queen. When we first started breeding, we didn't have science to guide us on which cannabinoids we were working with and which cannabinoids were coming into our garden. Through intuitive breeding work, we found later on that we were naturally attracted to CBD. And it was through the genetics of Rose Queen and a number of others that we were able to develop a high CBD cultivar that had almost no THC in it. And this is our 1 to 20. This one has less than 1% THC. Some people would consider it a hemp variety. I think it's definitely still a cannabis variety because it contains the terpenes and it contains the bud structure of a cannabis cultivar. And I think real quickly, I would just want to distinguish my understanding of hemp and cannabis. Hemp is a plant that has been grown for fiber production and fuel production, making ropes, making sails, making biofuels. It was never intended to be a medicinal plant. Whereas cannabis has always been grown and tended to be a medicinal plant. And so now, as we see legalization coming forward, there is a confusion of hemp and cannabis being defined by their THC content at 0.3% THC, and I think we're missing the point there. Cannabis is a medicinal plant. Hemp is grown for fiber and other forms of production. So when we look at Rose Queen, it expresses what we would consider as a hemp plant in this day and age, but really it comes from the cannabis lineage. We're at the state fair, so I'll make a comparison with sheep. If you raised sheep for 10,000 years and you raised a specific flock of sheep to produce milk, and then suddenly regulations came along and said, well, actually, you're only allowed to harvest wool from these plants, but you've been spending the last 10,000 years breeding it for milk production, you would then be using a sheep bred for milk production to harvest wool, and it wouldn't be that effective. We're doing the same thing with cannabis right now. We are using hemp to produce CBD, and we are sending CBD across the nation, and people are finding that CBD is not as effective as they've been told. That's because this plant was never intended to be a medicinal compound, but our regulations are forcing people to use hemp for CBD. So Rose Queen is a cannabis varietal that offers CBD that has the medicinal compounds in her lineage to really bring healing in a way that most hemp varietals cannot. After our work with breeding high CBD genetics, we found through some plant spirit meditations that really high THC, high CBD, these were all interesting, but let's take a step back to the endocannabinoid system. What is the endocannabinoid system responsible for? Does anybody remember? It's about balance. And if we're feeding our endocannabinoid system an extremely high dose of a single cannabinoid, is that a recipe for balance? I don't think it is. And so what we found in our communion with the cannabis plant and looking at the endocannabinoid system, we realized that balanced ratios were a path that we wanted to pursue. And that's the path that we've been on for the last 12 years, is bringing in balanced ratios. And that's what I'm going to talk about for the next 10 to 15 minutes. So within our 1-to-1 THC to CBD, we have Harmony Rose, Equinox, Rising Sun, Royal Blueberry. These are all genetics that we've bred on farm with different terpene profiles. Without getting too much into the nuances of terpenes, because that's a whole nother talk in itself, we found that a 1-to-1 ratio was important in finding balance, but also diversifying the terpene profiles helped to bring healing to those needing a 1-to-1. It allowed a more diverse array of healing potential than just a single 1-to-1 cultivar could offer. And so over the last 12 years, we've been able to develop, well, more than just these 4, but these are the 4 that have really had an incremental effect on many of our patients. Royal Blueberry carries a unique amount of beta-caryophyllene. Equinox carries a unique amount of terpenoline. Rising Sun carries a unique amount of pinene. And Harmony Rose carries a unique amount of ocimene. I'm not going to go into the subtleties of how those different terpenes affect you, But what we found is that different patients have been drawn to these one-to-ones for different use cases. This one right here is our shining star, Pink Boost Goddess. She, over the last 3 years, she's been nominated for the last 3 years in a row by the Emerald Cup as the most unique flower in California. The California State Fair has awarded us gold medal for 2 years in a row for the most unique flower. She's also won the Emerald Cup 2 years in a row. And she stands out in a way that no other strain that we've bred before has. Pink Boost Goddess is unique because of her incredible amount of what's called THCV. THC is something that we're all well familiar with, as well as CBD. But for the rest of my talk, we're going to go into some of the cannabinoids that you may not be as familiar with. And THCV is the first one. What we're finding with THCV is it has an incredible opportunity to support people struggling with attention deficit disorder and bringing focus, helping people struggling with diabetes to help regulate their blood sugar. It's helping people struggling with depression to elevate their mood and shift their perspective. The way that this cultivar was bred was through another plant spirit communication ceremony 8 years ago, in which my mom was sitting with cannabis and asking the spirit of cannabis, what does the spirit of cannabis believe is needed for humanity at this time to bring balance to our culture? She then started over 500 seeds and began to test every single one of them. And as she was testing them, she found that a very small amount, about 1 in 50, came forward with 1 to 2% THCV, which even to this day, 1 to 2% THCV is very significant. And anyone who breeds a genetic with that small amount of THCV, they're proud. That's an exciting moment. Pink Boost Goddess has now reached 9 and sometimes 10% THCV and has been recognized by SC Labs as having the highest THCV in California for the last 5 years in a row. This strain came forward when we paused and asked the spirit of cannabis to guide us in bringing forward new medicine, and we asked the plant what she would like us to bring forward, and THCV was the answer. And so in this work, like I've mentioned, we have seen patients struggling with diabetes use Pink Boost Goddess and achieve blood sugar levels lower than they've seen in 15 years. We've seen other patients working with Pink Boost Goddess struggling with depression, and they've been able to replace their depression medications with a small amount of Pink Boost Goddess tincture every single day. We've also seen people struggling with ADD that were put on Adderall and these other medications to help them focus when they were children. And now as they enter their adulthood, they're looking for something different. And they've been able to replace that medication with Pink Boost Goddess. When we look at our culture, we see that we're in an epidemic of a lack of attention, depression, and we are addicted to consumption. What THCV is showing us is that it helps to limit our consumption. It helps to curb our depression and elevate our moods. It helps to shift our perspective and bring focus and joy to our vision in life. And that is what, when I say bringing cannabis medicine and bringing balance to the lives of our community, Pink Boost Goddess is a great example of how working with the spirit of the plant and honoring the process all along the way through intention and through gratitude can produce something completely new and unique that is offering new medicine for humanity that we have not seen from the cannabis plant before. We developed Pink Boost Goddess 8 years ago. And over those 8 years, we've continued to work with her and breed within her lineage, but we've also begun to weave Pink Boost Goddess into a number of other genetics that we have. You'll recall Harmony Rose, which was one of our 1-to-1 CBD to THC cultivars that's osamine dominant. We wove that together with Pink Boost Goddess to breed what we're calling 4 directions. And if you think back earlier in my presentation, and I was showing you in our greenhouse, we have the 4 elements facing in the 4 cardinal directions. Part of the ceremony that we do on the farm is honoring and calling in the forces from the 4 directions and calling in the gifts and the wisdom of each of the 4 elements to come and guide the plants, to help them mature, to bring this new medicine forward. And 4 directions is over 12 years of that prayer coming together year after year to bring a cultivar with 4 cannabinoids in a balanced ratio. That's a 1-to-1 of THC and CBD, as well as a 1-to-1 of THCV, and then a new cannabinoid, CBDV. And that's a new cannabinoid for this talk, not a new cannabinoid overall. CBDV has been studied and observed for decades. In terms of our genetics, this was the first genetic that we were able to weave CBDV in. What we're finding with CBDV is it has an incredible use case for seizures. It's non-psychoactive, so it's great for children that are dealing with chronic issues that are leading to neurological damage, and seizures are one of the main cases for that. CBD has been effective as well as THC in preventing seizures, but it doesn't cure all of them. And what research is finding is that CBDV could be effective in some of those minute cases in which THC and CBD is not effective in reducing or completely eliminating the seizures. So we're really excited to have this unique cultivar. Hi, buddy. What we're also finding is that through a balanced relationship of these cannabinoids, we're finding a very enjoyable effect. This cultivar contains less than 8% THC. And this year, we submitted it into the Emerald Cup Awards into the third-party certified sun-grown flower category, which is mostly high THC cultivars. This came in 2nd place, matched up against the 20%ers, the 30%ers, the 15%ers. All of these high THCV cultivars were submitted into this category, and 4 directions with less than 8% THC came in 2nd. That tells you a lot about this plant. And that also gives our culture and our community an opportunity to reassess our constant chase for the highest THC. Is that really what we need? Is that really what we want? Or are we just being told that the highest THC is the best weed? 4 Directions is a wonderful example of proving that that is not the case. And when we look at the endocannabinoid system and we remember some of the points that I made about balance and homeostasis, we find that small amounts of multiple cannabinoids can be very beneficial for a large group of the population. 4 Directions offers a low amount of 4 different cannabinoids. So it has an opportunity to bring healing to the body in ways that no other cannabis cultivar has before, because it has 4 tools in its toolkit. And they can work individually, and they can also work cooperatively. So in some cases, what we're finding with CBDV is if CBD is not present, CBDV could potentially behave differently. And so by having CBD with it, it's able to support CBDV in achieving homeostasis in the ways that it can. Another one of the crosses that we've created is a cross that we're calling Trilogy. This is THC, THCV, and CBG in a single cultivar. This is a cross of our strain called Equinox with Pink Boost Goddess. What we're finding with CBG is that it can help with energy, it can help reduce glaucoma, and it can help promote focus. If we think of THCV, it also supports energy, it also supports focus. And so now with Trilogy, we have an opportunity to experience two cannabinoids working together with similar goals in mind. And we can see that CBG and THCV have many similarities when studied individually. But what happens when they work collaboratively? That's something we don't quite know yet. But as breeders, the first step is creating a cultivar that can then be studied and understood. It's very easy to isolate a single compound and study it individually in a lab. The reality is that's not how life works. Life is a constant symphony of changing factors, and our environments are never the same and can never be replicated. And so when we put all of our weight onto science and the study of individual molecules isolated, we're limiting the perspective that we have to observe what these cannabinoids are capable of. And Trilogy gives us a really unique opportunity to see what happens when two rare cannabinoids, CBG and THCV, work together. This cultivar was created last year, so the research that we have on it is very small. So far, we've received great feedback. It is definitely an energetic cultivar. I'm hearing from some patients, they're experiencing the connection to eyesight and relieving pressure on their eyes. And so even in year one, some of the things that we could expect through a collaboration of CBG and THCV, we are seeing that in our patients. But the potential is not limited to what we see when we study them individually and isolated. I think Trilogy has a lot of more benefits to offer, and in a matter of time, we'll be able to see what a collaboration between these cannabinoids can do for humanity. And so now, at this point in time, we've gone through a number of the genetics that we've bred. I've shared a few of the secrets that we've discovered on our journey with cannabis. But I want to ask you, some of you are cannabis users, some of you are cannabis breeders. What are some of the hidden secrets of cannabis that you've discovered on your journey? What are some life-changing moments that cannabis has brought you? Would anybody like to share?
Friendships.
Friendships.
A friend with weed is a friend indeed.
Yes. The altruism of cannabis is quite a powerful gift. Thank you. Anyone else? Say that again. The sativa for artwork? Yard work. Yes. Yes. And so do you know what makes a sativa? So when we look at the plant, there are a number of different terpenes and cannabinoids that support the experience that we know of as sativa. Because when we look at today, there's three categories that most people are familiar with, and that's sativa, hybrid, and indica. But behind that categorization, you can begin to find parallels between specific terpenes and specific cannabinoids coming together to create the experience that you know of as a sativa. Out of the genetics that I've shared today, the trilogy offers THCV as well as the terpene called terpenoline. Terpenoline is found in a large majority of quote-unquote sativa cultivars. THCV is also very similar in experience to what people consider a sativa. So when you're out looking for sativa-like cultivars, look for a small amount of THCV, look for a small amount of terpenoline, and that can help you be more informed on your journey of finding the right cannabis for you. I wanted to share a couple other notes. I'm going to need my phone for this one because I want to make sure that I get these right. In 2015, there was a study looking at pain and inflammation that showed that full plant extracts are more effective than isolated compounds. So as breeders, this gives us an opportunity to create cultivars that naturally display these unique cannabinoid ratios. Instead of taking a cannabinoid and isolating it from a plant, and then taking another plant and isolating that cannabinoid and then blending it together to make your formulation, what if we could create a plant that is naturally working with those two cannabinoids from the point that the seed is germinated? When we grow up and are born in our family and grow up, are raised, there's a level of commitment and a level of connection that we have with our family that's hard to recreate with people that you meet later on in life. As that connection is developed through a familial connection, we can imagine that the cannabis plant, as it's producing these unique cannabinoids, is able to work together and synthesize these cannabinoids in a way that we cannot do in the lab. It's done within the plant. And when we then begin to consider the terpenes and we think of the entourage effect, you can then see why this 2015 study holds a lot more weight than some may give credit to. When we look at the products on the market today, the majority of mixed cannabinoid ratio products are derived from two different plants, and those cannabinoids are then combined later on in the process. By having a full plant extract that naturally produces these unique cannabinoid ratios, the potential for healing increases dramatically. I also want to talk about effective dosing amounts for THC, because right now there's a chase for THC and the highest THC. And when customers go into the shop, they think the higher THC means the better flower. According to some research provided by Dr. Sulak, he's finding that effective doses range as low as 0.05 milligrams per kilogram per day for patients. What does that mean? That means that a patient taking about 3 milligrams of THC in a day can find that to be a therapeutic dose. To help you put that in context, if you smoked a joint that was 14% THC, that's delivering approximately 150 milligrams of THC to your system. Clinical research is showing that 3 milligrams per day can be a therapeutic dose in many cases. One joint offers 150 milligrams. So when we embark on a healing journey with cannabis, we can find through science that the chase for the highest THC is not logically the path that we should be pursuing if we're trying to understand the medicinal potential of this plant. Research is finding that very small amounts of these cannabinoids can be life-changing for patients. There was one case of a patient that was dealing with seizures. This was a young child. 0.015 milligrams per day resolved their seizures. And this was of THCA, which is non-psychoactive. An important note there, THC and THCA. THCA is the raw form of THC. So in the raw plant itself, you have THCA, and then when you heat it up, it's called decarboxylation. It heats the plant up, turns it into THC. That's what becomes psychoactive. That's what gets you high. 0.015 milligrams of THCA changed this child's life and went from multiple seizures to none. So just a very small therapeutic dose can be completely life-changing for many patients. And for now, we are left with a system that requires most of us to self-medicate, to go to the dispensary and hope we get a bud tender that's educated enough to direct us to a cultivar or to a product that's going to give us the experience we're looking for. Right now, the industry is young. And as more research continues to come forward, we will be able to find that less is indeed more. So the last bit of my presentation is, how do you find us? Where can you find the cultivars we've talked about today? If you want to reach out to me, I'll be over in the corner for a little while under the Visit Mendocino, Magic is Real. So you can talk to me there. But for now, all of the cultivars that I talked about today will be available through FarmCut this coming year. FarmCut is a cooperative of 5 small family farms. We're all Sun and Earth certified. We all use organic practices. We all grow food on the land. We're working together to bring cannabis medicine to the California community. We package everything ourselves, and then it's vacuum sealed, so it stays fresh. The buds are not fully trimmed, so it leaves the cannabinoids and terpenes fully intact, so that when you crack the seal on that jar, it's as good as it was when it left the farm. Some of our other supporting partners that are helping us on this journey include Soulful, which is a dispensary out of Sebastopol, Santa Rosa, and San Francisco. You can find our flower as well as our tinctures created by Cosmic View in the center, our cartridges created by Chemistry on the right, as well as our pre-rolls created by Garden Society on the left. So depending on your preferred method of dosing, we have options for you in all of these different forms. All of these are available at Soulful. We also have a number, 30 to 40 other dispensaries across California that carry some or all of the products above. Thank you everyone so much. And if you have any questions, you can come and find me in the back next to the Visit Mendocino booth.